Lernen a block Gemara, and today's daf is daf Kuv Dalet. Just quickly recap what's going on here. In the Mishnah, we're talking about if you sell something and how much do you tolerate a deviation from what we actually spoke about. So we went through different products and what a person is, how much they're expecting, a barrel of oil, how much oil minus, and wine, how much you're going to get the full amount of wine, a little bit less. So here we're talking about if I sell you a base koir, which is 30 saw of soil. And it turns out to be that some of the soil is not usable. It's rocky or whatever it is. Or if it's not so that we said that generally speaking, if I didn't say those words, I'm going to give you an accurate amount. And if you conclude that even if you don't spell out hein chasad, hein yasser, whether it's more or less, we don't say those words, it's as if you say more or less. And we say we tolerate up to a quarter of a kav per saw. A saw is made up of 6 kavin, which each kav has 4 quarters, so it's 24. In other words, 4%. There's a tolerance level of more or less 4%. That's mechila. Yeah, it's not exactly. Unless I say mida bachebel, which means I'm giving you exact, measured, and this and that. But otherwise, we tolerate a 4% deviation. If it's more than a 4% deviation, if it's more than 7.5 kavin in a 30 saw in a koir, so then we say that it's up to the moicher whether you have to now buy that extra land that you got, an excess, let's say it's more than, you got 7 plus 7.5 kavin plus. Then you have to buy, and we'll see more later, not just the excess over the 7.5. We had a discussion a few weeks ago. Once you pay more, you pay the entire amount. If it's more than 9 kavin, and we learned in the Field Aleph that the 9 kavin field is considered a significant tract of land. If it's more than 9 kavin, then the lekech has to, the moicha takes the land back, and the lekech has to pay for it. So between 7.5 and 9, we say the moicher's choice. He can either give me the land or give me the money. And the Gemara wants to know, why are we saying money here? It's more than 7.5. Give it over back to the moicher. You sold 30 saw, but actually you gave him 31 saw and 1.5 kavin and one, let's say 2 kavin. So it's more than 7.5, more than what we tolerate for mechila. So the Gemara wants to know, why does the moicher between 7.5 and 9 kavin have the choice of whether just to seize the land or whether to get the lekech to buy it from him and pay it? But once it's 9, then the din is that any excess land of a 9 goes back to the moicher. What happens between 7.5 and 9? Says the Gemara, we're up to the 2 dots and Kuv Dalet Amar Aleph, about sort of right underneath the middle of the page. Mahu machzele mois. What do you give back if it's an excess of 7.5 kavin? No, it's 4% roughly. That's what it is. So if it's less than 30 saw, 15 saw, it's 4% of that. Is liyafas koiche shel moicher amrinan liyafas koiche shel lekech lamin. It seems from here that the Mishnah says the reason why we're doing it is to help out the vendor. What do you mean to help out the vendor? If the vendor is going to take that excess land, let's say there's 8 kavin, right, more than the 30 saw, 8 kavin. What's the vendor going to do with a little piece of land that's 8 kavin? You can't do anything with it. We had in the Mishnah that it says that the minimum, if you have 2 partners, they want to subdivide the land. You only subdivide the land if it's kedei chalukah. If it's enough, each one should have something. What's the minimum by a field kedei chalukah? 9 kavin per person. By a garden, we said, what do you call it? A kav is enough by a garden. According to Rabbi Akiva, half a kav. That's enough to plant a garden. So if the moicher will take back the 8 kavin, what's the moicher going to do with it? So there's no benefit to the moicher. Therefore, we say to the moicher, that's your choice. You could tell the lekech to pay you for it, the extra money. And it's a case, as Ram says, zenen v'zelo chaser. The Bava Basra has Hanois getting the money, and you don't lose out because you're getting extra land for it. You're not paying anything more. You got instead of 30 saw, you got 31 and a bit saw. So nobody loses here, and there's a win-win situation. But it's up to the moicher. If the moicher says, "Yeah, I can work with 8 kavin," then it's his choice. But once it's 9 kavin, 9 kavin is a significant tract of land. Then the moicher takes the 9 kavin always. Says the Gemara, so it's not like me, we're only out to help the moicher. We're not out to help the lekech. What happens if the lekech says, there's 8 kavin here. I don't want to, I don't want you, what do you call it, to take the land. I don't want you to take the land because then you're going to be right on next to my land with your machinery and everything, even though it's a small piece. I want to buy it from you. Can the lekech force the meicher to say to the meicher, eight kavin? No, I don't want you to take back the. Can the lekech say to the meicher, I don't want you to come because then you'll be my neighbor. I want to have the whole land by myself. So, because sounds like Mishnah, the only one we work for, advocate for, is the meicher. We don't advocate for the lekech at all. And that's what sounds like our Mishnah. And you have a problem with that. Because what Tanya didn't be learning, this what it says. We don't help out the lekech. The lekech says, look, I don't want any strangers nearby. I want to force you to sell me that the excess land, 8 kavin. But Tanya, didn't we learn? Piches, Shiva kavin, and machzor lekoy. Let's say it was only 7.5 kavin per koy, which is what we said is the tolerance level which they're mochel to each other. Or Shiva kavin or machzor lekoy. Either it was the 30 saw was reduced by 7.5 kavin, or is increased by 7.5 kavin. The deal is a deal. Nothing changes. Nobody can walk away. Or the yosim kavin, if it's more than 7.5 kavin, that's already no longer mochel. Is koyfin as a mochel limkoy and the rest of the likach. We can force the meicher to sell. We force the lekech to buy. If the meicher says to the lekech, look, I don't want the money. Take the land. Fine, that's what our Mishnah says. But it says clearly here, we force the meicher to sell. If the lekech says, I want you to buy the land, I want you to give me the money, whatever it is, we force. Say no. Of course we don't. It's up to the meicher totally. We don't force the meicher to sell the land. We don't force the meicher to sell the land. If the lekech says, look, I want the land, we're not going to force the meicher. But says the Brisa, clearly we do. No. Once, you know what we're talking about here? When he bought it in let's say in Nissan, the land was $10 or so. Now, or let's say $10 a kav. Now, when this whole deal and they realize that it's wrong measurement, 3 months later in Tammuz, suddenly there was inflation, and the land now is $20 a kav. So the lekech says, okay, you're going to tell me that I got by mistake extra land, you want me to buy it, but I'm not paying $20, I want to pay $10. Once the meicher agreed to say, look, I don't want the money, buy it, that we for the meicher use the old price, not the new price. That's what koyfin is meicher. But otherwise, we're here only advocating on behalf of the meicher. If the lekech says, it's 8 kavin, I want you to sell me the 8 kavin, we can't force the meicher to do it. If the meicher says, no, I want the land, the meicher is totally up to it. Yeah, 9 kavin. Once you measure it doesn't say, but you assume the time. We had another case about it. No, the time it takes for normally till you get a surveyor in to come and do whatever the normal time is. Yeah. Pasuk, you can have the kid as well. House was more expensive in the beginning when he bought it. Now it's much cheaper. We say to him, if you're going to give him land, you decided that he should keep the land and he should pay you for it. You gotta pay the price of the other way around. So here's talking about it where it was expensive, and now the price is cheaper, and you want to force the guy to pay the old prices. He said, no, pay the price of now. It says another Brisa, you pay the price when you bought it. Sounds like even though then it was more expensive than today, he pays the old price because that's what he bought it at. So no, how's he going to have a zoylimikod? Forget. Or they're talking about it was cheap in the beginning, and then it became expensive. So then the lekech in that case, once you for the lekech, it always wins. Once the meicher decides to sell the land, they said, you take the excess land, now the amount of money he pays, the lekech always benefits. If it was cheaper then, he pays the old price. If it's cheaper today, he pays today's price. Okay, says the Gemara, She'im Shayir Besada Beis Tes Kavin. Now here's an interesting question. Mishnah says that if there were 9 kavin left, that's a significant tract of land, then the meicher takes the land back. Is it 9 kavin per koir? Or 9 kavin in total? Do we say that's that ratio of 9 kavin per koir? Or do we say that I don't care if it's 20 koirim you sold, if the excess is a total of 9 kavin? No, it can be ever because we said there is a ratio of 7.5 kavin that is everyone is meichel, and that definitely is per koir. 4% are meichel. But if it's more than the 4%, if it's more than the 4%, but it's more than a 30 saw, it's 40 saw. So it's more than the 4%, but it's 9. The total is 9 kavin. Do we say low that just like the 9 kavin, just like the 4% is per saw per koir, so too this excess of 9 kavin is per saw? Or do we say no? The 9 kavin is as long as it doesn't. The 9 kavin is in total, as long as it's not doesn't work out to less than the ratio for no. But if 9 kavin is 3%, then you're Michael. If talking about in other words, if 9 kavin over 2 koir, 9 kavin of 2 koir will be less than 4%. Then we said before, everyone was Michael. Do you accept a 4% deviation from what I ordered? So assuming that these 9 kavin are more than 4%, so it's not 2 koir, it's 40 so a koir and a bit. So it's more than the 7. It's more than the 9 kavin. It's more than 4%. What happens there? Do we say that since it's only in total 9 kavin, the moich has a choice money or not, or do we say that no, since it's a 9 kavin tract of land and you can use it, the moich must take the land? Says the Gemara. It's machlekes. Amar Abuna. Test kamish amru. The 9 kavin say afilu bebika gdola. Even if it's more than a koir, it's if it's 9 kavin, it's a tract of land that's usable. The moich has to take the land. And Rabbi Nachman says, "Noisen shiva kavin machzil chol koir b'koir." It's per koir. These proportions are per koir. The e kamilsi you say to the teacher's kavin, hadri. And if it's more than 9 kavin, then you have to give it back. No, but I don't care how many saw it is, as long as it's more than 4%. So you're not meichel it, and it's more than 9 kavin. The total amount, even though it's not proportional, it's a big. It's a hush for enough tracts of land. The owner takes the land back. Says the Gemara, it says in our Mishnah, Shim Shai, so the base teaches kavin. If it's left in the field 9 kavin, doesn't say in the Mishnah that was dafka per koir. It sounds like in total 9 kavin. As long as it's more than the ratio of let's say 4% roughly, then and it's 9 kavin, the meicha takes the land back. Lav is over like korayim. Told him to like korayim and everything in proportion to that. Loy, no, the zavalei koir. He sold him a koir. The Mishnah is talking about a standard case, because the Mishnah starts off hamoicha koir. Because the Mishnah starts off that you sold him one koir, 30 saw. The rest of the Mishnah is talking about, or at least this case is talking about a koir. We're not talking about if it's greater than a koir. Then you work out the proportions. What do you call it? Something about base it said by garden, it's a half a kav. A garden, we said that choshev enough is a half a kav to use, according to us. According to Rakiva, a quarter of a kav. So it says that by a garden, if the total amount is more than a half a kav, then the moichet takes it back because he can use a significant tract of land. And again, it doesn't tell you to what proportion. Is this legabe a saw? It doesn't tell you, or more, or even 2 saw. It doesn't tell you the proportions. Again, it sounds like the total is a saw. You give it back, like Reb Huna. Says the Gemara, we get it, but this is I'm on 2 sawim. Still, as long as there's a half a kav and it's a sizable amount they can use, the moichet has to take the land. So Gemara, that's the same thing. Well, I know there's only saw. We're talking about only per saw. We're not talking about a case where there's a larger amount of field. Gemara continues. Kiva base roiva. Rabbi Kiva holds that a quarter of a kav is already significant for a garden. My lab, there's only saw. He sold him a saw. And instead of it, because of course we're talking about per half a saw, it's a saw. In other words, I don't care how much you sold them, as long as the proportion is more than the tolerance that we have, and it's a hush of a piece, the moichet has to take it back. We don't stop. That part is not proportional. That is the total. And no, there's only chatzis. Very difficult to understand. Once the Gemara established that the Mishnah is talking about a certain koir or a saw, why then automatically assume that it means more than a saw? We already established it's just talking about the same ratio all the time, whatever you sold them. Anyway, Bava Basra, that's the question. Sadav and Nas is gina. A gina needs a lot more water, irrigation, because all the vegetables have to be watered every single day, versus a sada doesn't need that much water. The field, or even grains, it doesn't need every single day water. So what happens if you started out a sada and became a garden? Suddenly they found a bore, and they found some spring underground, and now suddenly you can plant vegetables there and everything else. It's a gina. Now a gina is different sizes. Remember, so when you bought it, it was a sada, and now when you're measuring it and you find out that it's whatever it is, suddenly it's a gina. Do we look at it the time when you bought it, and therefore it's 9 kavin before we say the moicha you have to buy it, and 7.5 kavin moicha, or do we look at it now the time? It's it's not about value, but the usage. Now the usage is a gina. It's a whole different calculation.
That's why you have zoning laws.
Okay, true, but yeah, but the circumstances changed. Suddenly you found this water right underneath it. Well, the other way around. Gidim and Asasada, the water dried up, no longer use it as a vegetable garden, but now it can be a field. Might. Teiku. Which time do you look at it? Tani, we learned Im kosher. But what happens if the vendor owned a field contiguous to the field that he sold? Owned the field, and then instead of he gave you 30 saw, he gave you 30 saw and two kavim. Now, before we said that you're generally your meichel, you can keep it. But if those two kavim are attached to the field of the meichel, then the Meicher says, no, I want it back because I have it. The whole vart of 4% is, what's the Meicher do for such a small piece of land? He's happy to give it to you. But if the Meicher owns land right next door and the Meicher and this, whatever piece is extra, is contiguous to the Meicher's land, no matter how small it is, the Meicher can use it. It becomes just an extension of his own land. So I'm not Meicher anything. I want it back. I thought there was a 30 saw. It turned out to be 30 saw and two kavim. Give me those two kavim back because I can use it. So Tani, my I feel kosher, even then the smallest tract of land, sliver of land, you got to get back to the Meichel, you can use it. So boy Ravashi has a question which is very similar before. Boy Mao Shetafsik. What happened? There's a boy between that little extra land, between the vendor's land and the buyer's land. So contiguous, there's a boy in between, which means in order to plow, you have to go around the boy. Is that a become a tircha for the vendors? You know what? Such a small piece, you keep it. Or a masa mayimau creek, which is wider, and it's a lot longer. Mao shetaf derecharabi mao, even wider than that, and it goes entire length. But if you have a hedge, of dikla palm trees, take all these are the question. How do we deal with that? Then the Mishnah says, not only give back the quarter of the kav, you give everything back. The chiddush here is, the quarter of kav we tolerate, 4% we tolerate. But if it's more than 4%, you got to pay the excess. The Mishnah is giving you a chiddush that not only do you have to pay the excess more than 4%, once you got to give it back, you give back also the part that you normally wouldn't meichel, right? So because I said last time, you conclude in the Gemara, it's not really mechila, just it's too big of a bother to work with it. But if it's not a bother, once you're bothering anyway for the excess, give back the whole lot. So the Mishnah's wording should have been, not only do you have to give back the excess over and above the mechila, but also got to give the part that you're meichel. But the Mishnah writes here that not only give back the part that you're meichel, you also give back the meiser. So which direction are you going? Is supposed to get the other way around. You're right. Change the Mishnah around. Not only give back the excess, you give back also the part that normally you're meichel. Now the Mishnah continues. What happens when your words clash? You start off saying mida b'chevel. I'm selling you 30 saw punktlich exactly, but the measure and everything else, and then you say more or less. What do we do then? You listen to the first. So we had a normal machlekes of Yesir Meir. If tfais lashon rishon or tfais lashon achar, you hear the first word, you hear the last words. Tosfos says very nicely. He says there's three possible scenarios. One scenario is where the words clash. The first word and the last word clash. Then you got to work out which one it is. Another scenario is where you can type so the second word is interpreting your first word. But I'm doing, even though it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, I'm not. I'm explaining what I said. That it's a bit vague. This is what I mean. And the third one is, I'm not sure what I want. So I say both things. Like oila, we'll learn. If I say oila and asham or whatever, two kabbanas that are not really the same. What do we do? Sometimes you say twice name.
This is what happens when you buy a field with a half dick, a half chassid. He says punktlich and he says merve.
In other words, if he meant, did he mean both? Sometimes he meant actually both. He in his mind, he thought he can make them both happen. He thought he can make both happen. Tmuras oila, tmuras asham. He thought it's possible that somehow or another that's what the outcome will be. So he meant both. Sometimes he changed his mind. Question is which one then you follow, the first or the second. And the third way is he's explaining himself. No. This is twice tradition. We have a machlekes. So here comes the Mishnah. So he says, I'm going to sell you a 30 saw exact. I measure hein chaser, hein yeser, more or less. Batel hein chaser, that's yeser, mida b'chevel. The second words, here they clash. can be both, either exact or approximate. So the second words cancel. Gemar dvorim mitzvahs. This Mishnah holds, this is bananas. You always listen to the last words he says. Then he says, Hein chaser, hein yaser. Batel, hein chaser, hein yaser, mida bechebel. That the hein chaser, hein yaser, the last word he says, cancels the first words he says. The first word he said was chebel b'mida. Then he says, more or less, the more or less cancels. What happened all the way around? He said, hein chaser, hein yaser. First he said, more or less. Then he said, mida b'chebel, exact. Then batel, mida b'chebel, hein chaser, hein yaser. Then the second, no, is always he followed the second words. Divrei benan, these words are bananas. And if you remember, we had a whole Gemara in the end of Mitzvah. We have a guy says, I'm renting you out this apartment for 12 golden coins, a coin a month. And turned out to be an Ibiyah. So he sort of cited his words here. Is it one which is 13, or Sachakal 12? So remember, we said we had a machlekes there. We said that Rabbi Achman said it depends if it's the beginning of the month, so then the money is still sitting by the seicher, or is it the end of the month where you already rented out the apartment and the assumption you can pay him 13? How's it work? So all the way around. I want you to argue because they hold that it's a suffix. We don't know what's supposed to be. Is it $1 a month, or is it $12 or $12 for the year? We don't know which one it is. So that way we say it's a suffix. We're sort of machmir. Ma'ika mashlan tanina. So we know that, right? Didn't we learn? There's a story. He rented a bathhouse from his friend. He rented it for 12 gold coins for the year. So if he said 12 for the year, and then he said 1 gold coin per month. So if you do 1 gold coin per month, it's 13. If you said 12, it's 12. So what do we do in this case? Says they said we don't know. It's a suffix. Do we go the first word, which is a 12 golden coins, so therefore the leap year benefits the seichet, or do we go with the last words, which is a dinner l'chaydish, which then benefits the masket? So because we don't know, we divide it in half. Nobody pays only half the rent for the last month. In other words, we're not sure if it's twice lashon rishon or twice lashon achen, which argues with our Mishnah, because Banana says clearly twice lashon achen. Says the Gemara. So what's your chiddush? Tell me that they argue. We know it's a fetish. It's a fetish mission. If we only knew that, I would have thought maybe they don't argue. Maybe Bananas also agrees that what? Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe he changed his mind. He started at 12 and then he realized, based on Ibiyar, so he said of dinner chiddush. Or maybe you can say he's explaining his words. When I said $1 a month, when I said $12, is because I'm going to give you 12 months. I'm not giving you 13 months. I'm giving you the old years, the 12-month year. Even though this is 13 months, it's $1 a month. Maybe I'm explaining myself. Yeah. What do you call it? We could say, we're not sure. Is he changing his mind? Is he saying, look, first he thought, I'll give you 12, I'll give you a deal. And then he said, why should I? It's a leap year, why should I? So is he changing his mind? And it's a question of which lashon should you accept, the first or the second. And Bananas hold you always take the second lashon. Or but maybe he's just explaining himself. When I said a dinner, I said 12 dinner because I'm only giving you 12 months. So Bananas himself will be made, since it's not clear that he's contradicting himself. Maybe Bananas is made. It's a suffix. You pay half the rent on 30 months. We know where you go. Abel Hoche, there's no suffix. The vadeka hodebe. Here, clearly, he's canceling his first words. First, he says, "Hein chaser hein yaser," knows more or less, and then he says, "Mida b'chevel." Well, fakert. Clearly, you can't say he's interpreting his word more or less, and I'm giving you exact. There's no other way of learning than he changed his mind. In this case, Banana says you go after lashon. A malay, kamash along, come along. So that's what Abba Mama comes along. But Abba says, no, I want you to know that Bananas argues with these two Tanaim over here, that and they clearly argue, and they hold you don't go after Lashon Achen. It's a suffix which way to go. I will continue tomorrow in Mitzvah Hashem.